This is your Clark's Turbine and Pest Control, Powder Post Beetle, and Old House Borer training. It is the responsibility of every Clark's Turbine and Pest Control employee to comply with our policy of business ethics and conduct. Disregarding or failing to comply with the standard of business ethics and conduct could lead to disciplinary action up to and including possible termination of employment. To complete this training, you will need, in the digital format, nothing. But don't forget, on your phone you have the NPMA Field Guide app so you can make insect identifications out in the field. In the print format, you're going to need the borer carrier label and the SDS, and you're going to need the label and SDS binder in order for you to put all that stuff into, and you're going to need a highlighter. Unfortunately, labels and SDSs are not available in the digital format yet. If you do not have the required items for this training, pause this presentation and gather the needed materials now. During the presentation, if something is highlighted in red, then you need to look at your documentation that you have, whether digital or printed, and take a look at it while we're discussing it. If something is highlighted in yellow, then you need to take your highlighter and highlight it. In the digital format, it should already be highlighted for you. And if you see blue letters dropping in, then you need to take your pen and write it down for future reference. In the digital format, it will be there for you already. So wood boring or wood infesting insects help turn dead wood or a fallen tree back into plant food. It turns it into organic material, which turns back into the soil. The problem is that they don't know the difference between the fallen tree or the floor joist of your home. So wood boring or wood infesting insects can attack seasoned wood, and they can be very destructive. There are literally thousands, 30,000 different types of wood-destroying insects: beetles, bees, ants, borers, termites, but we're only interested in a couple of them right now. So let's take a look at the biology of the powder post beetle and the old house borer. So you will come in contact with these in crawl spaces and in attics. So let's start off with the powder post beetle. It's called a powder post beetle because of this powder-like frass that comes out of the emergence holes. So if you take a look at the beetle, it is around 1/32 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch in length, and it has an elongated body. And if you look at it from the side, it's relatively flat from top to bottom, and the sides of the body are relatively parallel to one another. And you'll also notice on the powder post beetle that the head width, the pronotum width, and the elytra width. The elytra is the covering of the wings. Those three widths are all fairly equal. The antenna is 11 segmented. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And it ends with a 2-segmented club, 1 and 2. They can range in color from reddish brown to black. The mature larvae are around 5/16 of an inch in length, and they have a C shape to them. They're also nearly white in color. The female powder post beetle lay their eggs, around 15 to 50 eggs, on exposed wood pores, cracks, or crevices. The eggs are never deposited on polished, painted, or varnished surfaces. The larvae tunnel only in the sapwood and usually tunnel with the grain of the wood. As they bore, the larvae loosely pack their tunnels with very fine, powder-like dust, like talcum powder or flour. After several molts requiring 2 to 9 months, the mature larva bores to near the surface and constructs a pupal chamber and pupates. When the adults emerge, it bores straight to the wood surface and exits or emerges. Indoors, meaning in attics or crawl spaces, this usually happens in late winter to early spring, and with little feeding, they then mate, and the whole process starts all over again. The total development time from egg to adult usually requires 9 to 12 months. As you can see, here's some powder post beetle damage. And you can see they're running with the grain. The tunnels are running with the grain of the wood, and then they turn to go for their emergence hole. So this little hole right here are these holes right here. And these holes are about 1/32 of an inch to 1/16 of an inch in diameter. That's a dime right there. So one of those holes is, one of the larger holes is smaller than the L in the word liberty, and the smaller ones, which are like 1/16, are around the same size as the O in God, in God we trust, on the dime. Now remember, these are perfectly round holes. So is it active or not? Well, according to the Clemson University Department of Pesticide Regulation, is it active or not? And how do you know? A Guide for Applicators, bulletin number 24, which is available online, says right here, powder post beetles, if the frass is streaming, meaning stuck to the wood below emergence holes or piled beneath emergence holes, then you have an active infestation. If you have emergence holes without streaming frass, or old frass in galleries or protected locations, then you do not have an active infestation. So what does streaming frass look like? Well, here are a couple examples of streaming frass, meaning that the frass is coming out of the holes and is streaming down the side of the wood. Now, it's got to look like relatively fresh cut wood in order for it to be streaming. All right, so that's powder post beetles. Let's move on to the old house borer. The old house borer apparently gets its common name from the old European practice of reusing lumber from old houses. Even though it usually attacks wood of less than 10 years old, it's still called an old house borer. The adult old house borer is about 5/8 of an inch to 1 inch in length. The body is elongated, and it is also slightly flattened in form. The pronotum of the old house borer is slightly bulbous in shape, kind of a rounded shape to it. And it also has 2 shiny knobs or bumps on either side of the pronotum. The antennae cover about 1/3 of its body or even more, and the old house borers run around a brownish black to a solid black. The mature larvae are about 1.25 inches in length, and the color is usually always white. The life cycle is similar to the powder post beetle, but there are some very marked differences. The female lays about 40 to 50 eggs in cracks and crevices in the wood over about a 5-day period. The eggs hatch in about 9 days, and then they enter into the sapwood. Now, the development of the larva can last as long as 2 to 15 years, depending on the conditions. If it's very dry, such as in attics, it could take up to 15 years. Now, what happens next is that the larva makes a tunnel close to the surface of the wood, and then it packs the tunnel right here with a bunch of frass, and then it goes back down, and then it pupates, and then it will emerge, and it usually emerges during the summer months. You're looking at around June, July, and August. And then it turns into an adult, they mate, and the whole process starts all over again. Again, although the adults are very strong flyers, they often reinfest the wood from which they have emerged. Damage and signs of infestation. Exit holes are oval, and they range in size from 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch. And the edges are often ragged. From the surface, the exit tunnel goes inward about 1 to 2 inches and then curves, larval tunnel with a ratio of minimum to maximum diameter of 1 to 2. Another indication of an infestation is the appearance of piles of frass. And here's frass in a gallery, that they could have piles of frass in the galleries. Their frass consists of a very fine powder and very tiny, elongated, blunt end pellets. So the frass is tightly packed in the tunnels in the galleries. And the surface of most galleries has a rippled pattern which other structural borers do not make. And if you take a look right here, you can see that there are ridges in the galleries. And other wood-boring insects don't make that. And here is that frass that we're talking about. And it's powder with these little pellets mixed in. Whereas the powder post beetle frass is all powdery, kind of like baby powder or flour. All right, so how do you know if it's active or not for old house borers? Same old bulletin number 24. Old house borer streaming frass is not enough evidence to call an old house borer infestation as active. Fortunately, older larvae tend to tunnel near the surface of the wood and are relatively easy to collect. Capturing one is enough evidence to establish an active infestation. Alternatively, larvae make a distinctive gnawing noise, like a clicking or a rasping sound. So hearing the noise would also be enough evidence to determine an active infestation. So it's a lot different than the powder post beetles to realize whether or not an infestation is active or not. All right, to sum up the difference between the two, powder post beetles, there's their little powder post beetle, there's an old house borer, about that size, and it is about 1/32 to 1/4 of an inch, whereas the old house borer is much bigger, it's 5/8 to 1 inch. Powder post beetles will infest new and old wood, the same as old house borers, both new and old wood. Powder post beetles prefers hardwoods like oaks, and hardwoods, and whereas the old house borers will prefer softwoods like southern yellow pine. Powder post beetles will reinfest wood, and so will old house borers. The powder post beetle makes round holes, whereas the old house borer makes oval holes. The powder post beetle holes are 1/32 to 1/16 of an inch round, whereas the old house borer holes are 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch, so they're much bigger. The powder post beetle and the old house borer, both of them can fly. And in order to have an active infestation, you need streaming frass for the powder post beetle. And to call an old house borer infestation active, you actually need the insect or you need to hear it. All right, so now it's time to get out the borer care label. Let's go to page number 1. We're going to look at this top section first. And under the borer care label, it says that it's a termiticide, insecticide, and fungicide. We're going to be using the insecticide part of the label. And it says for the prevention and control of, and yes, listed wood-destroying beetles, and it's listed below what we want to use it for. The active ingredient is DOT, disodium octaborate tetrahydrate, at 40%. As always, we need to keep it out of reach of children. And under precautionary statements, here is your PPE. Long sleeve shirt, long pants, socks, shoes, and chemical-resistant gloves. All right, so we're going to go to the bottom half of page number 1. And under environmental hazards, this pesticide is toxic to fish and wildlife. Do not apply directly to water. Do not apply to intertidal areas where the surface water is present. Or do not apply to intertidal areas below the mean high water mark. Do not contaminate water when cleaning equipment or disposing of equipment and wash waters. All right, let's go to page number 2, and we're going to go to that section there where it says user safety recommendations. You need to wash your hands before eating, drinking, chewing gum, using tobacco, or using the toilet. You need to remove clothing immediately if pesticide gets inside. Then wash thoroughly and put on clean clothing. Remove PPE immediately after handling this product. Wash the outside of gloves before removing as soon as possible. Wash thoroughly and change into clean clothing. Under mixing instructions, Right here it states under hand sprayers, mix in a clean container and stir the solution until completely uniform. Always mix in a separate container, then add the solution to a spray tank. So don't dump this into your rig and then add water. You have to mix it outside, or mix it outside of your spray can. You cannot mix it in the spray can because it says mixing Boracare directly in a spray tank can block hoses and nozzles. All right, for down at the bottom there, it says for tracking purposes area. I just want you to see at the very bottom of that, it says use soap and water to clean up tools. All right, let's look at page number 3, and we're going to look at table A on page number 3. Now under table A, if you look down under target pests, it says powder post beetles, and we are allowed to do it at a 1-to-1, a 2-to-1, and a 5-to-1, but it says right here, for all remedial treatments, you have to use a 1-to-1 dilution. So if we have an active infestation, we have to use a 1-to-1 dilution ratio. And for old house borers, it gives us the option of a 1-to-1 or a 5-to-1, but again, it says you have to use a 1-to-1 dilution for remedial treatments. So again, if there's active infestation, you have to use a 1-to-1 active solution. All right, so go to page number 4, and we're going to look at this section right here, right under brown rot, starting around where it says the word cardboard. All right, and it says apply Boracare solutions to only bare wood, plywood, particle board, and other cellulosic materials where an intact water repellent such as paint, stain, or sealer is not present. Can only treat plain wood. If it's painted or stained or sealed, cannot do it with Boracare. All right, so this area right here down in the lower left-hand corner, as a remedial treatment, Boracare will both eliminate and prevent infestation of wood-boring beetles. That's what we're talking about now. And it says right here, older wood-boring beetle larvae, especially old house borers that are already present in the wood at the time of the treatment, may occasionally emerge, top right-hand corner, sometime after treatment. This is because they are no longer feeding on the wood. This will not occur frequently enough to cause structural damage to any wooden member, and reinfestation is prevented. All right, so we're going to look at this whole section right here under section A. And it says, remedial wooden structure treatment for the control of old house borer, powder post beetles. And infested wood, we need to spray Boracare into beetle holes and decay pockets. It says to apply 1 coat of Boracare to the point of surface saturation to all infested and susceptible wood, paying particular attention to infested areas. So not only do you have to treat the areas that are already infested, but you have to treat all the areas that are susceptible to get infestation. It also says apply 2 coats of Boracare to those wood members with that only have 1 or 2 exposed sides. Now that would be 2 floor joists together, or if you only can get at one side of the sill plate or 2 sides of the sill plate, then you're going to have to do 2 coats. All right, a little further down on page number 4 where it says basements and crawl spaces. Now keeping in mind crawl spaces is more than likely the majority of our treatment that we're going to be doing for powder post beetle and old house borer infestations. It says right here, and you don't have to highlight all this because it's apply 1 coat to the point of surface saturation, yada, 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 yada. Allow first application to dry by waiting at least 20 minutes between applications. And here's the big thing that I need you to highlight. 1 gallon of solution, that means it's already been diluted, 1 gallon of Boracare to 1 gallon of water. 1 gallon of solution will treat 200 square feet of floor area, which includes the subfloor, the floor joist, the header, and the sill plates. All right, so let's take a look at an average graph, and we're going to use what's called the takeaway method, and we're going to add up the whole square footage of everything that's in that red area. So we're going to take 60 times, and then we're going to add up that 10, and then add up to 20, and then add up that other 10 across the top. So when we add that up and multiply it out, then we end up with 60 times 40, and that equals 2,400 square feet. So that whole area of the red is 2,400 square feet. But there's areas in there that we don't need to treat. Well, this is one area right here because it's a patio. So that's 10 times 20. So that's 200 square feet we don't need to treat. And then let's add in this area down here in the garage, because that also is a slab. We're not treating the powder post beetles in the crawl space. So that garage is 20 by 20, so that's 400 square feet. And then we add in this little area right here. Well, the numbers are already there from us doing the graph, so that's 5 times 10, so that's 50 square feet. And then this little area up front right here is 15 times 5, which is 75, so we don't need to treat 725 feet. So all that area in yellow adds up to 725. So we simply take the area in red that we started off with, 2,400. We take away the 725, and we end up with a crawl space of 1,675 square feet. Well, what does that tell us? Well, we already know that 1 gallon of solution will treat 200 square feet of floor area, which includes all the subfloor, the floor joists, the header, and the sill plates. So we simply take 1,675 and we divide it by 200, and that equals 8.375. So to treat this crawl space, it's going to take 8.375 gallons of diluted borer care to treat this for powder post beetles or old house borers. So what does that tell us? Well, 8.375 gallons of borer care at a 1-to-1 ratio, that means we're using 4.1875 gallons of undiluted borer care. Why do we need to know that? Well, we need to know how much to take with us. So we'll need to know how much to take at the beginning. Also, 1 gallon costs us about $64, $63.95. So 4.1875 gallons at 63.95, our chemical cost is $267.79. Now, I'm not going to get into pricing here because that's going to be up to the sales department and up to the managers, but I'm going to give you an idea here. You have to include labor, so it's going to take a little bit of time to put out that 8.375 gallons while you're upside down on your back, getting rid of and have to get rid of the insulation and have to get rid of the also have to get rid of the vapor barrier, and you got to include some profit margin, and you got to include some commission. So I'm going to assume it's going to be over $1,000 to treat that crawl space, that 1,675 square foot crawl space. So again, for all the pricing, you need to see your manager. All right, let's go to page 10 of the label, the last part of the label. And under storage and disposal, it says container management. We don't see this very often. It says that it is a refillable container. You could refill this container only with borer care. So you can't tote around water in it. You can refill it with borer care. Do not reuse this container for any other purpose. And basically, in a nutshell, this whole area here says for final disposal, you need to triple rinse, puncture, and dispose. And it goes into triple rinsing in this area here, and it says puncture and dispose right here. All right, let's go to the SDS. And if you look down at the very bottom under number 4, and the top part of the page, number 4 continues on. That's what we're going to look at. First aid measures: if you get anything in the eye, flush victim's eye with large quantities of water while holding the eyelids apart. That's different from other labels that we've been looking at before. And the top part of number 4 on the top part of the page says, if you get it on your skin, wash skin thoroughly with soap and water. Get medical attention if irritation develops. Remove and launder clothing before reuse. And most important symptoms may cause eye and skin irritation. Inhalation of mists may cause mild mucous membrane and respiratory irritation, harmful if swallowed. Repeated ingestion may cause kidney damage. So let's look under number 6 on the first page of the safety data sheet, and that is accidental release measures, or if you spill it. Make sure personal precautions, evacuate the spill area and keep unprotected personnel away. Wear the appropriate personal clothing as described in Section 8. Avoid releases to the environment. And methods and materials for containment and cleaning up. Dike and collect liquid or absorb with an inert absorbent and place in appropriate containers for disposal. Prevent spill from entering sewers and water courses. Report releases as required by local, state, and federal authorities. And speaking of section number 8, it's at the bottom of page number 1 and at the top of page number 2. So we're going to look at those two areas right now. And basically, number 8 says exposure control, personal protection, and all the information really is on page number 2. And basically, if you need to wear a respirator, then you need to wear one. It's not saying that you have to every time, but if you're using it in areas where it's enclosed, like a crawl space, then you need to wear a respirator. Skin protection is already told you that you need to wear impervious gloves, such as butyl rubber or nitrile. And eye protection, you need to wear safety goggles or glasses when splashing as possible. And splashing is more than likely possible when you're in a crawl space. And you need to wear a long sleeve shirt, long pants, socks, and shoes when using this product. Well, we've gone over the biology and we've gone over the label of the product. And we've gone over a procedure according to the label. Let's go over the law that covers this as well. So the South Carolina Pesticide Control Act, Article number 17, under I, 27-1070I says, control measures are not normally necessary for infestations of wood-destroying organisms which are not capable of reinfesting structural lumber or properly seasoned wood, except as provided below. And we know that both the old house borer and the powder post beetle are able to reinfest. So we go further down to number 4. It says, before treatment is recommended, infestations of other wood-destroying organisms capable of reinfesting must be determined to be active. And then it shows you how to tell whether or not powder post beetles are active. We've already gone over that. And it tells you how old house borers are supposed to be active. We've already gone over that. But then it tells you what we need to do for treatment. It says, all beetle frass must be removed from treated vertical surfaces during a localized treatment. During a fumigation, frass must be removed from at least 2 readily accessible areas to allow the determination of the success of the fumigation. If streaming frass is observed during the next season of activity, the infestation must be considered to have remained active. Treatments, especially fumigations, may be proposed and conducted only when there is conclusive evidence of an active infestation or with a specific written consent and acknowledgement of the lack of activity on the part of the property owner or their agent. So what does that mean to you? Well, that means that the frass needs to be swept down while you're doing the treatment. And you have to make sure that you add the amount of time of labor that you need to do that into your price. And don't forget the other couple of things to do with this is that you need to make sure that the insulation needs to be removed because you have to get at the bare wood and you have to add the time in that it takes to do that. And the vapor barrier also needs to be removed or it needs to be cleaned afterward, and you need to add in the labor to do that as well. As with all labels and SDSs, make sure that you put them in your label and SDS binder. And don't forget, on your phone you have the NPMA Field Guide app so you can make identifications for these type of insects and others when you're out in the field. This has been your Clark's Termite and Pest Control, Powder Post Beetle, and Old House Borer training.